Our next speaker is Dr. Kylo, Hammos, and he's going to be speaking to us about live blood cell analysis. Please help me welcome Dr. Kylo Hammos, D.C.
I have an unusual pronounced name. It's H-A-M-M-E-S, and it's Hammos. So I always feel bad when people introduce me who don't know me because it's difficult to pronounce it. So I basically will answer almost anything. So hey you is also okay. Okay, how many here have ever heard of live blood cell analysis? I know some of you have actually come to my booth and we've tested you this weekend. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the test itself and in reality why we do the test, because we're really trying to look at some foundational issues when it comes to health. Okay. So I'm going to. I normally have a little erase board, and in my haste to get over here, I did not bring my dry erase marker, so I have an erase board with nothing to write on. So I'm going to have to go slow, and instead of writing down the points that I want you to remember, I'm going to have to go through them slowly. Okay. Before we go much further, I want to talk about health. Health in general takes place on a cellular level. Our bodies are comprised of millions upon millions of cells that are all working towards a common goal, and that is supposed to be for health of the human body. Now, the next thing that we want to introduce is, well, what does a cell need to be healthy? And there's a number of key components that the body must have if that cell is going to be healthy. I'm going to start by talking about macronutrients. These are things that the body must have for health. And one of them is protein. Okay? And actually that's a misnomer because the body really doesn't need protein. What it really needs is something called an amino acid, because amino acids are necessary for structure. Okay? What we do is we eat things in our food that have proteins, and then our body will digest and break them down into their basic structure, which is an amino acid. And I'm going to get into that in just a second. But we do need amino acids as building blocks for health of the cell. Another macronutrient that we must have comes from carbohydrates, but actually what we need from that carbohydrate is something called glucose. Glucose is the fuel that runs the cell. Okay, without fuel, the cell doesn't work or work very well, and if we don't have stabilized glucose, that is also a problem. The third key component the cell must have in order to be healthy is fatty acids. Fatty acids are necessary for many, many different things when it comes to the cell, but the little cell membrane is comprised of amino acids, and we must have those in order for that cell to be healthy. Not only is it comprised the cell wall, but it also helps transport minerals in and out of the body. So in order to utilize that calcium that so many people take, we must have a good source of fatty acid to take that calcium from the blood and get it into the cell tissue. Okay, so sometimes it's a little more complicated than just a lack of a mineral, for instance. Fatty acids are also the basic building blocks for all hormones, so they are essential in for more than just the health of the cell or for the cell. Okay, so those are the three macronutrients. The next thing I want to talk about is the micronutrients, and those are things such as minerals. We all know that we must have minerals for that cell to be healthy. Well, what is a mineral for is the next question. And the answer to that is a mineral is a chemical lubricant. And what that means is it allows processes to take place more readily or more easily. Okay? So if you don't have the appropriate amount of minerals, then it's more difficult for your cells to perform whatever activity that they're supposed to do for the greater good of the body. Okay? The next one would be a vitamin complex. A vitamin complex is very similar to a mineral, and that is necessary as a chemical lubricant. Again, does this a very similar thing to a mineral. Okay, again, it's a chemical lubricant. It's necessary for the production and utilization of the cell and cell energy. Okay, without them, the cell doesn't work very well or at all. Okay, so we must have them. Another thing I want to talk about is an enzyme. And this is where we're really going to go as far as live blood cell analysis, this is why we're here, is we're going to talk about enzymes. So I'm going to hold that thought just for a second because that's more of the talk that we're going to go in that direction. Going back to the vitamins and the mineral complexes, in your physiology books, they're actually considered coenzymes because they make enzymes work more effectively. Okay, so we're going to get into that enzyme and talk a lot about its importance in just a second. A couple other things are essential for the health of that cell. One would be good old H2O, which is water. Must have it. And because I don't have my erase board, I have to think about what I just said and make sure I'm not missing anything. So you have to excuse me a second. Okay, so we had our basic nutrients in the water. Okay, that is what is necessary for a cell to be healthy. Okay, so let's go back to that enzyme. It's probably the most documented, most studied component that we just introduced. Probably the industry that knows more about enzymes than any other is the canning industry. Does anyone have any idea why the canning industry might know a lot about enzymes? Okay. The canning industry has identified an understanding of enzymes because they destroy enzymes to help preserve food. Okay. Now what I'm going to do when I'm talking about enzymes, I'm going to introduce 3 different types of enzymes. The first type of enzyme is called a food enzyme. It's what's in food in its natural state. For instance, if I were to take an apple off the tree and I were to take a bite out of that apple and place it right up here on the podium, what's going to start happening to that apple? It oxidizes. Well, really what has happened is the oxidization is actually the activation of the enzyme within the apple. So it starts to break itself down. This is a key concept that I want you to understand. Food in its natural state will break itself down and digest itself. This is why the canning industry knows more about enzymes than almost any other industry. In order to preserve food for a prolonged period of time, they had to kill those enzymes, otherwise that food would digest itself and go bad. Okay? I'm going to introduce the second type of enzyme. It's called a pancreatic enzyme. The pancreas, among one of its roles, it has many, but one of its roles is that of producing enzymes for the body for the digestion and assimilation of food. Okay? The third, I'm going to go back to pancreas in just a second. The third type of enzyme is called a metabolic enzyme. These enzymes are part of every cell, and that's why I introduced it as part of what the cell needs to be healthy, are these metabolic enzymes. What they actually do is they help chemical processes take place very easily. Okay, for instance, if we took that apple, we took a bite and we chewed it up, essentially the digestional system of the human body is designed to hold that food in the stomach for about 20 minutes, and what is supposed to happen is that apple, based on its own enzymes, will start breaking itself down on its own. After about 20 minutes, the food content will have started to break down, and then it will start moving down into the small intestine, where the pancreas kicks in, dumping small amounts of its own enzymes on that food to break it down to its basic component. Remember, we talked about protein converting over to amino acids. We talked about the carbohydrates breaking over down into the glucose. And then the fats need to break down to the basic fatty acid composition so the cell can use it. The pancreas helps assist that to take it to the next level. Now, I'm going to introduce that's a perfect world, perfect case scenario. Okay? Let's talk about a potential problem. And that is that heating of the food that we introduced through the canning or through food preparation, maybe the microwave, maybe the stovetop, and something such as that, starts to destroy the enzyme. Okay? The researchers have found that these enzymes are so sensitive to heat that they actually start dying at about 118 degrees. So anytime that food is heated beyond 118 degrees, enzyme death starts to occur. Okay? So let's do that little scenario with the apple again. I take that same apple, but instead of taking it raw straight off the tree, I take that apple and I heat it in some way, shape, or form, whether it be canned, whether it be microwaved, what have you. What happens if we then break the seal and stick that apple up here? Is it going to oxidize and turn brown like it would have before? The answer is no. You've just killed one of the vital components that help that apple break itself down. So now we eat the apple. Well, we do have some enzymes in the mouth, in the saliva. They do break down certain things, and it's primarily carbohydrates. They don't break any of the protein or the fat down. But we take that into the stomach now. It hasn't had any of its own digestive enzymes to start breaking it down, so it basically does nothing for about 20 minutes. Now the body decides that it's time to move that food on, if it can, into the small intestine. Well, now the pancreas recognizes that it must come up with all of the enzymes to break that food down. Well, that's a problem because when we're born, we have something that we call a enzyme bank account. It's not an endless supply. The pancreas can't come up with this stuff forever to digest it. So now we have a problem, okay? It works fine when we're young for most people. We don't seem to have any problems with indigestion and heartburn and other types of conditions that are a sign that the body's been pushed way beyond its normal limits to digest. So we go along and we think we're just fine. Well, actually what's happening is slowly we're using that bank account very, very quickly. We're not depositing anything back in because most people don't eat enough raw food. They're not eating enough of food that have those digestive enzymes in them. Okay? Now, I also mentioned a third type of enzyme called a metabolic enzyme. Well, the body is so intelligent that it will actually borrow and steal from itself in order to keep functioning or keep living. So instead of letting the pancreas totally run out of its pancreatic enzymes, the body will go rob and steal from itself. So it will use the next type of enzyme called a metabolic enzyme. Well, it just so happens that without these metabolic enzymes, it's very difficult for the body to repair itself normally or defend itself normally, such as an immune system. So we start to slowly drain that bank account over the course of time. Okay? This is the starting or the stage of many different diseases. A lot of them are started with the inability to digest correctly. Now, the liver is the body's ultimate food processor. So after that food is continually broke down, it's carried to the liver where the liver should finish off the job of breaking it down to its basic component and then start reassembling these things and pushing them to wherever they need to go to build for health. Okay? Is everyone with me so far? All right. It's a complicated journey. I'm trying to make it fairly easy here to understand. So some of the different problems that can occur when we run out of these enzymes, for instance, and if any of you have been over to my booth, I've already talked to you about this. If we start running out of the enzymes that digest the proteins and the pancreas is overworked, we start having problems with the itises. Arthritis, bursitis, and other inflammatory types of conditions are a result of an inability to completely digest and break down protein. If it's the fats, the primary disease processes associated with fat maldigestion has to do with heart disease and obesity. And then we can also look at the carbohydrates, which have a tendency towards diabetes. And those are the big ones when it comes to the disease process. So where does the live blood cell analysis come into play? Okay? Remember I told you that it's essential that the body digest and assimilate correctly. Well, it just so happens that we can take a small sampling of blood out of your finger, put it under a microscope, and we can get a good feel for what type of enzyme activity you have going on. We can see if those cells are starting to clump together that there's a problem with your body's ability to assimilate protein correctly. If you have a lot of Kylo in the bloodstream, which is another word for blood fat, we know that you're having a difficulty with the assimilation of fats. We can also see clumps of starches that haven't completely digested also in the bloodstream. So we can get a clear idea of how the enzyme cycle is working within an individual by doing a live blood cell analysis. Okay? Any questions? I rambled through a lot of stuff real quick, and I like to always leave time for questions because a lot of times I introduce new and good information through that. Go ahead. Okay. More than likely you have run out of your bank account. Okay. Who here has heard of lactose intolerance? Okay. Why can we digest lactose when we're young but we can't when we're older? We ran out of our bank account. the sensitivity. Here's what happens. The body's very intelligent. Once it's run out of the ability to digest it and break it down, now it becomes something that the body deems as a toxin. So it will start rallying itself to attack it. Has anyone heard of an autoimmune condition? Guess where they start? An inability to digest correctly is where autoimmune conditions start.
It's something that I've had for a long time, just not known, and finally just got to the point where I got so sick and I was so full of toxins, my body started shutting down.
Right.
My organs started to shut down.
Right.
And it was unbelievable that I was putting in toxins, really not knowing.
Right.
And I was literally poisoning myself to, like I was on narcotics just to get out of bed in the morning.
Right.
So you're saying that I probably had it for a while and just didn't know.
Well, you were using your enzymes to digest all of your life up until the point where, let's put this in another perspective. Let's talk about symptoms real quick. A symptom is the final sign that your body needs help. It's been pushed beyond its normal limits to function, and now it's got to put you down to stop you doing it. Otherwise, you're jeopardizing the health of the tissue. There's such severe damage occurring that the body's going to finally say, you've got to stop, and I'm going to stop you with the symptom. It could be a backache. So if you're damaging your tissues of your back, your body's going to say, guess what? You ain't moving. Okay? DC means Doctor of Chiropractic. I'm also a clinical nutritionist, so I have a couple degrees. I see people, that they push their bodies beyond the point of return so often they finally go, well, it just started yesterday. No, it didn't. This has been slowly accumulating over the course of time. And finally, when the symptom arrives, it's the last straw. It's when the body finally says, you've got to stop taking that lactose in, otherwise it's creating such damage and such an irritant, you're destroying tissues. We've got to stop you from doing it. And the only way to do that is to make you feel miserable, unfortunately. But the symptom is not the problem. And that's what a lot of people, modern medicine, unfortunately, is symptom-driven. And I'm not here to attack anyone, but understand what it is. It's crisis intervention and symptom control. It is not health. It's far from health. Okay? So we introduce, what are the basic components the cell needs for health? If you're missing any one of those things, you're going to have disease. It's called nutritional deficiency. Okay? Well, there's another side of the coin. It's called toxicity. The only known cause of disease is either deficiency or toxicity. You either have too much or too little of what is necessary for balance and symmetry for health of the human body. That's it. Genetics is another one, but guess where genetics comes from? Your nutritional deficiencies and toxicities your ancestors had. So if you have a genetic condition, go blame them because it was their fault. They created it. Yes? You can pay your debts back. Well, how do you do that? All right, well, here you go. Get your pens ready. There's a couple things that you need to do to pay back that enzyme debt. One of them is by eating more raw food. Oh, everyone's going, oh, turn him off. I don't want to hear that. It's not easy. No, it's not. Okay? Unfortunately, you're not going to hear me say that there's a product, the first thing you do. It always starts with what you eat. Okay? Everyone's heard it. You are what you eat. That's where it's got to start, number one. The second thing that I encourage my patients to do and instruct them to do is I introduce juicing. Okay? Now, that does not go get Tropicana from the store. What did they do to Tropicana that makes it not good? Because they talk about that they're pure juice. I taught you something. What was it that they do? Pasteurization is heating. Why? To kill the enzyme so it stays on the shelf for long periods of time. Is everyone with me? Okay, step 1, eat more raw. Step 2, start juicing. Step 3, the use of a supplemental enzyme. Understand what supplements are. They are to supplement a normal, healthy diet. Yes, we use supplements in our clinic. Yes, we recommend them. But if I would be a very irresponsible doctor if I was standing up here telling you need to take the formula first. You don't. You got to look at the lifestyle and fix it and start working on it first. That means you eat right, you juice, then you start looking at what supplements could aid in the repair that the body goes through. That's how you pay back that debt. You've accrued a debt by not taking in enzymes. Well, you eat more raw food. You're juicing. Well, the juice has not been heated or pasteurized. You've got more enzymes. Then you take a supplemental enzyme. You'll start paying back that enzyme debt. You're going to put back into the bank account instead of withdrawing from the bank account. Okay? This is why I like questions, because you guys get me in a direction. I bring up some things I think are critical that you understand. Depends upon how sick you are. You know what? There's no one thing. I can't give you any. It's individualized. I would start by saying everyone have at least one 8-ounce glass of fresh juice every day. Some people might need more. No. Why not? Again, it has to do with the digestibility. There's certain food items that digest easily together, some that don't. Yes, there's certain ones that go together. If you're interested on how to juice correctly, stop by our booth out front here and ask us. We carry a book by Dr. Joel Robbins. He has 3 doctorate degrees. One's an MD, one's a doctor of chiropractic at DC, and he also a doctor of naturopath. He has written an excellent book on juicing. We carry it in our office, and if you're interested in the concepts and principles behind juicing, let us know. We get you one of those books. I think they're only $15. It's a pretty good deal. It also has good recipes in there if you're trying to achieve a certain goal. If you have a certain disease process that's already been diagnosed, it gives some good formulations in there to help build back the body's enzymes. We're inside. Right as you go in the main auditorium, we're right on your right. Yes. I'm sorry?
Knowing that you kind of have that enzyme,
Mm-hmm.
if I were to have a live blood cell analysis,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to tell me what you just told me out?
Probably. But seeing is believing. When I can put your blood up and I can show you variations of what's supposed to be there, it's kind of helps people understand the severity of what's going on. Okay, understand that diagnostic tools are not the be-all, end-all. In order to be a good practitioner, it takes many things. One of them is taking good question and answer, getting to know someone. Then having those types of tests available, is a very good aid, not only to help the practitioner, but help the person who's needing help.
Have you heard of the LCAT test?
There's a lot of food. Let me tell you about a story that Harvard University put out when it comes to food sensitivities and allergies. They did a study where they figured out what the person's known allergies were. They put them in a totally clean room, and they showed them pictures of the allergy, and the body went into a full-blown reaction just by looking at the picture. Okay? The body has a memory. What they also did in the study is they introduced food enzymes. 85% of all these people with these known allergies were totally eliminated with the use of a digestional enzyme. Allergies and sensitivities start with this process. Unless there's some other thing. There could be, it could be more complicated. I'm making a simplistic story here. Patients typically aren't simplistic. They might have a heavy metal toxicity on top of that. And there might, there's so many things that could be going on. Remember, it can be a toxicity blended with a deficiency. A lot of times there is. And this is why it's not easy. The more difficult the case, the more we have to go deeper in working with them. But good understanding of allergies and sensitivities. Right. Right. There's no one test that stands on its own. I wish I could say that this test is 100% foolproof. It is the be-all, end-all. That's not reality. Okay? Just like humans are imperfect, a test is not perfect either. There's so many things that can skew it. That's why, I'm out here doing live scans. You know what? I'm trying not to make recommendations, primarily because it's one sampling in one time. You know what? And there could be things going on that vary that from time to time. It is a very reliable test. It's been tested and proven. The research is there. But, sometimes that one test is not the be-all, end-all. So if I hang my clinical hat on that one test, I'm not a very good practitioner. I'm sorry? Yes. Fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds. I'm not an advocate of raw animal flesh. Fruits, vegetables, raw nuts, and seeds are primarily what we're talking about. Also the raw cold-pressed oils. Okay? Yes. Pasteurized products, very little if any. That's why they don't go bad. That's why they can sit on the store shelf for years and years and years, and you don't have to eat them. And then you can open them up with your can opener and eat them. To a large degree. It's filler. Remember I said in the beginning, what are the basic nutrients that are necessary for the cell health? If you eat canned food, you're missing some of them. Right? So we need complete balance when it comes to our food. Frozen's better. Okay? They still have some enzymes intact, but some of them have been destroyed, but it depends upon how you prepare them. Absolutely frozen every time, because they freeze them when they're fresh. So it holds or freezes the die-off rate of the enzyme. So it slows that process down dramatically. Okay, I think I've only got like 1 minute left, so unfortunately I ran out of answers. However, we do have a booth out here today. We are doing both chiropractic screenings for potential spinal problems, and we're also offering live blood cell analysis for those who wish to experience it. Before or after therapy? Not very many. Because we have not very many. Tell you what, if you have questions, I don't mean to be rude and cut you off. I will answer all questions to the best of my ability out at our booth, but the next speaker will be coming up shortly. I do appreciate all of your time, and again, I will be available to either run the scans or answer questions out here at our booth. Thank you so much.